Welcome the timeless forgotten mystery. In the late 1990s, a storm was brewing, one so powerful that it left millionaires and investors across the globe penniless overnight. People didn't just lose their money, they lost their homes, their jobs, their dignity, and their futures. This is the story of a time when the phrase .com worked like magic. At first, it turned ordinary people into millionaires overnight. But soon, that very phrase became the cause of their ruin. This is the story of a technological whirlwind the world now remembers as the .com bubble. And if you look closely, you'll see a very similar storm forming in 2025 as well. Every major revolution starts with a tiny spark. And the spark that lit the .com bubble was a computer program called Mosaic. Back in 1993, the internet was a dull, text-only place with no visuals or appeal. Then came Mosaic, the first browser that could display both text and images. It was like watching magic unfold. This marked the beginning of a new era for the internet. Gradually, those colorless pages came to life. Behind this innovation was a young programmer named Mark Andreessen, who, along with his team, realized they had built something massive. They formed a company and called it Netscape. In August 1995, Netscape did something that shook Wall Street and global stock markets to their core. They went public through an IPO, or initial public offering. They priced their shares at $28 each, but as soon as the market opened, the price soared unexpectedly to $75 and eventually settled at $58. A company that wasn't even making real profits yet became worth $2.9 billion in just one day, all because of a browser. But it wasn't just Netscape that gained from this. Investors who bought shares at $28 saw their investment double in a single day. This was a massive signal to investors around the world. If a company's name ended in .com, its valuation could skyrocket, even if it wasn't profitable. That single idea gave birth to a new mindset. Profit is optional, growth is king. People weren't buying shares to earn a company's profits. They were chasing the price increase, hoping to cash out on growth alone. And so began the great .com gold rush. Everyone wanted to start an internet company. Venture capitalists, investors who pour money into startups, began funding companies blindly, with little scrutiny. One person launched a company to sell pet toys and named it pets.com. Someone else opened a fashion store online and called it boo.com. There was etoys.com and webvan.com, an online grocery service. Things escalated so quickly that in just a few short years, by 1999, 457 companies launched their IPOs, most of them .coms. On the first day of trading, their stock prices jumped by 80 to 90%. It was the era of easy money. People with no knowledge of the stock market were pouring their life savings into .com stocks, hoping to strike it rich. Whether you call it madness or mass delusion, the then chairman of the US Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, called it irrational exuberance, meaning baseless excitement. He warned that greed had overtaken logic, and that the market was inflating like a balloon, one that could burst at any moment. But since everyone was making money, his warnings were laughed off. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, was in full swing. .com CEOs started seeing themselves as rock stars. One such company, boo.com, which sold fashion items online, burned through $188 million in just 6 months, most of it on luxury and parties. Another company, Pixelon, spent millions on their launch party in Las Vegas, hiring famous bands for performances. These companies didn't have real business models or products, but they invested heavily in marketing. Not to sell products, but to sell shares. These companies only survived as long as new investors kept coming in. Take for example Webvan, which launched its first delivery center in the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area in June 1999. It gained popularity fast. During its IPO, it sold $50 million worth of shares at $15 each. With that money, it bought delivery vans, warehouses, and opened multiple locations. To attract more investors, they even hired a top executive from Apple, giving the impression that Webvan had a bright future. Encouraged by all this, investors globally started buying up Webvan shares. The stock price tripled quickly, and the company's valuation reached an astonishing $10 billion, all while it was still bleeding money. But this balloon was about to pop. Several key events triggered the collapse of the .com bubble. First was the fear of the Y2K bug, a widespread concern that, as the year changed from 1999 to 2000, old computer systems would crash because they couldn't process the new year format. People feared global failures in banking, electricity, and transport systems. Although the actual chaos never happened, The fear led to panic. Investors began pulling their money out of the stock market before 2000 even began. That was the first pinprick in the bubble. The second trigger was an increase in interest rates. In February 2000, Alan Greenspan raised interest rates, which meant borrowing money became more expensive, and saving money in banks became more rewarding. So investors started withdrawing their money from stocks and depositing it in banks for better returns. This was a death blow for dot-coms, which were surviving only on new investments. Now, even existing investors were backing out. And then came the final nail in the coffin: Japan. At the time, Japan was considered the king of global technology. But in March 2000, Japan officially announced that its economy had entered a downturn. This shocked global investors. The message was clear: if even Japan was struggling, what chance did anyone else have? Panic spread like wildfire. Investors rushed to sell off risky stocks, and the riskiest ones were, of course, dot-coms. A chain reaction followed. The Nasdaq Stock Exchange, home to most tech companies, started crashing. The index, which had been above 5,000 points in March 2000, dropped by 80% over the next 2 years, sinking to just 1,000 points. That meant if you had invested $100,000, it was now worth only $20,000. Nearly $1.75 trillion, approximately 100 Indian rupees lakh crore, vanished from the market. Companies once worth billions became worthless. Pets.com, Webvan, eToys, Boo.com, and thousands of others shut down. Along with them, millions of people lost their jobs. People who once saw themselves as tech geniuses were now left humiliated and jobless. The dot-com dream had turned into a nightmare. But from this rubble, a few survivors emerged. Companies that not only survived but went on to rule the world. Among them were Amazon, Google, eBay, and Apple. What set them apart? They had something most dot-coms lacked: a solid business model. Experts say it's easy to blame the dot-coms, but the real culprits were the capital markets, the investment banks, and the venture capitalists who fueled the fire with their greed. The dot-com bubble remains one of the most painful and important lessons in the history of the internet. It taught us that no matter how revolutionary a technology may be, the fundamentals of business remain the same. But the surprising part? It seems like the world didn't learn much from this 25-year-old disaster. In 2025, we are witnessing similar hype around new technologies like crypto and AI. Every other company is slapping AI or blockchain onto its name to attract investors, even when they have nothing to do with those technologies. One prime example is Builder.ai. In 2023, a grand party was held at a luxury 5-star hotel in Vietnam. Celebrities from around the world attended the glamorous launch of a new technology that claimed to build apps without any coding, all through AI. The company was called Builder.ai. Impressed by the pitch, investors, including Microsoft and SoftBank, poured in $250 million in funding in just one day. The company's valuation soon reached $1.5 billion, and many hailed it as the future of AI. But behind the curtain, a very different story was playing out. Investigations later revealed that the apps weren't being built by AI at all. They were secretly being developed by human engineers based in India, Vietnam, and Romania. Builder.ai turned out to be just a facade using AI as a buzzword. It was also accused of round-trip billing, showing fake transactions to inflate revenue. Once the truth came out, the story began to resemble the dot-com crash all over again. Today, Builder.ai is under investigation for fraud.